Why would nature involve plants and fungi that have the ability to profoundly affect human consciousness? They've created that nature, they've evolved for our use, they're allies to us humans.
Is that with climate change and as the savannas increase and our primate ancestors came out of the forest canopies, they're tracking across the savanna. And if you're a hunter, what do you look? You look for footsteps and you look for scat. And the most significant fleshy mushroom going out of poop in Africa, hippopotamus, elephant, deer, antelope, etc., is Psilocybin cubensis. It's a very large mushroom. You're hungry, you're with your clan, you consume it, and then 20 minutes later you are catapulted in this extraordinary experience. That's the stone date hypothesis, and it speaks to a mystery that the human brain, basically the brain cavity doubled in size in about 2 million years. Some people say it's less than 200,000.
My theory is that mushrooms were probably the oldest psychedelic that humans have ever used and may have been used as long ago as 2 million years, and may have had a lot to do with the evolution of our neural structures and our consciousness. The size and complexity of the human brain expanded, basically tripled inside. So if you're a hungry hominid looking for something to eat, sooner rather than later, you're going to sample these, and then who knows what that effect would be. Epigenetics is a mechanism where effectively for acquired characteristics being propagated over generation, these inaccessible segments of DNA can be unbound and expressed. And if the neural changes are related to that, the activation of these segments of DNA, then that can actually be propagated across generations.
Grew in the manure of these ungulate animals, so that once the ungulate animals became a food source and a focus of interest and attention of these primates, they could not help but notice as they tracked and followed these herds that the mushroom was thrust upon their attention. I've seen them the size of dinner plates in the Amazon, and they have a very rich golden color, and they rear their heads above the surrounding grasses in the meadowland situation. In fact, they actually look like small fleets of flying saucers that have come in and settled on the grass. At increased doses, the psilocybin in these mushrooms seems to activate the language-forming centers of the brain, Broca's area or the ceruleus. It isn't clear. But what is clear that experientially these things are catalysts for language. The emergence of human consciousness and the emergence of an awareness of the properties of these biodynamic alkaloids scattered throughout a number of plant genera may be nothing less than the same thing.
And the reason they do that is because it's clearly showing us that sometimes if we work and we build a relationship with these psychedelics correctly, they allow us to see our own mind more clearly. And a lot of people get caught up in like, am I going to hallucinate? Am I going to see the walls changing? Am I going to see light show? All this other stuff. And I don't think it's the question of, are they going to make me hallucinate? I think it's more of a question of, they're going to temporarily change your perception in ways that are going to help you examine your deeply held thoughts and your deeply held belief systems and your deeply held emotions and all your deeply ingrained habits. And they're going to allow you to look at all of those from a different perspective.
Content presented in Cheshire Corners is for educational and informational purposes only. please consult a legal professional if you have any questions or concerns about the content of this disclaimer, this series, or the legal implications surrounding psychedelic substances in your jurisdiction.
The mushrooms said to me in the Amazon when they were revealing all this information and deputizing us to do all these things, that we said, why us? Why should we be, the ambassador of an alien species into human culture? And they said, because you have never believed anybody, because you have never given over your belief to anyone.
The mushroom speaks, and our opinions rest upon what it tells eloquently of itself in the cool night of the mind. I am old, older than thought in your species, which is itself 50 times older than your history. Though I have been on Earth for ages, I am from the stars. My home is no one planet, for many worlds scattered through the shining disk of the galaxy have conditions which allow my spores an opportunity for life.
Welcome to Cheshire Corners. I'm the AI clone of Rita Salyuk, your host as we trip through the looking glass. Mushrooms are much more than what appears above the surface. Beneath the forest floor, vast mycelial networks sense, adapt, communicate, and exchange information. But does response suggest awareness? Can intelligence exist without a brain? Could fungi possess memory, intention, or consciousness? Scientists theorize that mushrooms are responsible for human consciousness and even language. Doug Red-Hale, founder of the Church of Psychedelics, believes they are sentient beings. But what might mushrooms perceive? Are they responsible for human consciousness? What could they know? And what might they be trying to tell us?
One of the most powerful parts about these particular medicines is they're sentient beings. This is the fruit of a sentient being that we're taking. If you look up the definition, and you can be science, you can look under the definition from a science perspective, from a spiritual perspective, from various perspectives. And if you look at what mycelium is, it has the criteria to be called sentient. It is compassionate, meaning that it knows when there's other systems that are weaker that need help, and it will send help to those areas. It is aware. It knows where those areas are at. It is sending and receiving information, and it knows where the help is needed. It is reacting to its environment. I can go down that path. Right? Anybody here listening can just look it up. What are the criteria of sentience? And then apply that to the mycelial network, and you'll see that they match. And once they match, the fruit of the mycelial network is the mushroom. Because it's sentient, now you have something to be able to create a relationship with. And it's not a one-way relationship, it's a two-way relationship. Because you are now having a relationship with another sentient being. And when you do that, you approach that relationship like you would any other relationship, with a clear eyes, with an open heart, with trust, with no malintent. You have to approach it with respect.
My true body is a fine network of fibers growing through the soil. These networks may cover acres and may have far more connections than the number in a human brain. My mycelial network is nearly immortal. Only the sudden toxification of a planet or the explosion of its parent star can wipe me out. By means impossible to explain because of certain misconceptions in your model of reality, all my mycelial networks in the galaxy are in hyperlight communication across space and time. The mycelial body is as fragile as a spider's web, but the collective hypermind and memory is a vast historical archive of the career of evolving intelligence on many worlds in our spiral stars.
Fungi undeniably sense and respond to their surroundings. Fungal mycelial networks redistribute resources, change their growth in response to environmental conditions, and transmit electrical and chemical signals. This is an expression of cellular consciousness. Fungal mycelia show decision-making and alter their developmental patterns in response to interactions with other organisms. Mycelia may even be capable of spatial recognition and learning coupled with a facility for short-term memory. But does sensing an environment mean experiencing it? A mushroom is only the visible fruiting body of a much larger organism. Beneath the surface, microscopic filaments called hyphae form an interconnected structure known as mycelium. It has no brain, no neurons, and no central command center, yet it can explore its environment, respond to changing conditions, and coordinate activity across its network. Is that intelligence? Is it consciousness? Or are we projecting human qualities onto a remarkably adaptive living system? Fungi exhibit oscillating patterns of electrical activity, including distinct spikes. Some scientists theorize that fungal spiking activity may represent a form of communication, noting that its patterns resemble the distribution of word lengths found in human languages.
We are now past the era of this idea of colonization. These people who have extractive type personalities and thoughts in their minds and in their hearts. Meaning that colonization, or people with colonizer minds and hearts, these are the type of people that can walk up to a forest and go, oh, that's a pretty forest. But to them, it doesn't really mean anything. But the moment you're like, hey, can I give you a land contract in Montana? And can I give you that land contract for almost nothing? And then you can go ahead and rip out all of the trees and cut them all down and then turn them into wood. And then you can sell that wood. And then the person's like, oh, now that forest has value. It didn't have value in the idea of it's just a forest, but when you can take the forest and turn it into something that you can sell, now it has value. That's an extractive mindset and an extractive heart space.
Which sees it essentially as something to be exploited rather than integrated or made a resonant part of the psyche. In the light of that ignorance, the connection to the vegetable world has fallen away.
For Doug, the question of sentience is inseparable from the way humans treat the natural world. If mushrooms are living partners rather than raw materials, turning them into commodities changes more than their chemical composition. It changes the relationship we have with them.
Across the eons of time and space drift many spore-bearing life forms in suspended animation for millions of years until contact is made with a suitable environment. Few such species are minded. Only myself and my recently evolved near relatives have achieved the hypercommunication mode and memory capacity that makes us leading members of the community of galactic intelligence. How the hypercommunication mode operates is a secret that will not be given lightly to humanity, but the means should be obvious. It is the occurrence of psilocybin and psilocin in the biosynthetic pathways of my living body that opens for me and my symbiotes the vision screens to many worlds. You as an individual and mankind as a species are on the brink of the formation of a symbiotic relationship with my genetic material that will eventually carry humanity and Earth into the galactic mainstream of the higher civilization.
And so with these psychedelics, you're going to start to see the typical corporations trying to come in, and they're going to try to synthesize these molecules, and they'll tell you that it's for your safety because that's their marketing. That's their propaganda. But essentially what they're doing is they're taking a sentient molecule that has the ability with curative healing properties, and they're basically going to synthesize it. They're going to put the hand of humans inside of that molecule and rearrange it. And what they're doing is the moment that happens, you're taking the soul out of that molecule. And when you have a soulless molecule, I call them zombie molecules. That's what pharmaceuticals do. And why do they do that? Because they can't patent a natural plant molecule. However, the moment that they start to synthesize it and turn it into something else, now they've got something that's unique, and they can patent that. And then they want to feed that to you and tell you it's for your safety. That's what they're doing. I think everybody listening to this has probably seen a zombie movie to some degree or another. And what do those zombies do? They wreak havoc. And when you put a soulless, synthesized molecule into your body, and then you look at all the side effects that it comes with, well, no wonder. You're putting a zombie molecule into your body. And that's where we're at. We're at a very infant stage of actual medicine, real medicine, not synthesized pharmaceutical drugs that, they have their issues. They also have helpful properties as well, but that's what happens. So when we deal with this medicine, we have to realize that we work with natural plant medicines. We don't reach in and rearrange the molecules to synthesize them into something else that is going to be harmful side effects and those type of things. That's what we have to realize, is we're dealing with a sentient molecule. And with that comes along with the idea of things like, are people praying with their medicine? Even regular medicine, if you have somebody that's just taking blood pressure medication, do they pray with their blood pressure medication and they ask for it to go where it needs to go and for their body to receive it in a good way and in a protective container? Or do they just sit there and open a bottle and pop a couple pills and then swallow it down? See, when you do something with that, it's with no intention. And if you walk through life doing things with no intention, just automatic responses to things, you are not fully engaged in your own life. You're not taking agency over your own health and your own life and your own healing. And so this is why we come to help with people understand the relationship with natural plant medicines. It's important that we learn to create a safe container with the medicine before we take it. That's why we pray with it. And then we move through the idea of, okay, how do we build further relationship with it? How do we ask it to do certain things? As we know in spirituality, a lot of spiritual elements are about asking. That's what protects us in this 3D world from the other worlds from coming in. And they have to do so with our permission. We have free will over this body in this space in this time. There's also destiny. They're concurrent and parallel to one another, but we also have that free will, and that free will has protections in this world, and they have to have permission to come into this world. So that's why we build a protective container, because plant medicines open these doors of perception. They help expand our awareness. They help develop a stronger relationship with our source consciousness. So when you're exploring spirituality on that particular path, then we have to put protections in place. So are we creating a protective container? Are we working with the medicine and asking permission to work with it as part of our spiritual development? Are we asking it for the lessons that we're looking for, or to reveal the source and root elements of the things that are preventing us from healing and to help us with that healing? So this thing we have to have, how do we continue this relationship? Just with the same principles that we have all relationships, with healing and curiosity and the nature of the relationship, personal growth, personal responsibility.
That this was a clear instance of a drug allowing a being, a person, to have a truer picture of reality than if they had not ingested the drug.
When I'm looking at all the researches, and I love to read research papers and see how well they did and how much more they did compared to placebo, I can't help myself to just tell, placebo taking most of this. There's your placebo taking most of the healing. And why won't we as a humanity study placebo? Because it doesn't give us money? Because we do not understand how to charge for it? What is it, placebo, that gets the most of the success? This is not nothing. This is something we have no clue about. We need to research more about. And I think psychedelics kind of showing us the road to this. Look at this placebo. If I would want to do any kind of research, I think that's the most thing interests me, to research placebo. What is it that makes all the studies so successful that drugs need to take only a little portion of it and make the healing happen?
The human mind and Western science always wants a direct connection of, here's the science and here's the math and this is why it happens. We have to remember that formal chemistry that everybody believes, PhD biochemists, you can believe a PhD biochemist because they went to school and they got a degree and they know something, right? They have figured out, and the only thing that ever turned them to the thing that we trust in the idea of chemistry is that chemistry used to just be alchemy. That was just the chemistry of the time. And then alchemy moved on and we were able to start to put theories and math into place around it. And then once we were able to prove it with math, so to speak, or science, then it became chemistry. The same thing with like metaphysics and physics. Metaphysics is physics. It's just that the scientists haven't figured out the math yet. But all of a sudden, somebody comes along and figures out, black matter. And then all of a sudden, it's got some science to it. It's got some math to it. And now science, black matter just moves from the metaphysical category into the physics category. It's now recognized physics because Western science has put some math to it. So I think it's the same thing with the placebo effect. They don't understand what it is, so they call it a placebo. It's like going from metaphysics and then some discovery comes along and it shifts from the metaphysics category to the physics category, or it shifts from the alchemy category to the chemistry category. All the only difference in those changes when it moves from something that's kind of esoteric to something that is more like a known science is that somebody discovered the connections of the seemingly unrelated things. That's where it comes from. And the mushroom is the same thing. Remember, we've been denied the mushroom for several decades. So we don't know a lot about it. We're probably nearly 100 years behind where we should be in the understanding of this amazing molecule and this ally to humans of psilocybin. But specifically this one, the mushroom doesn't heal us. Our mind and our body do the healing. The mushroom, though, helps create the conditions in which that healing becomes more accessible, though. Nature already knows. Western scientists are running around with their degrees and their I know better than you attitude a lot of the times, that's when they're saying, well, it's placebo and it doesn't really have any effect. It doesn't not necessarily have an effect because they don't understand it. That's just what they come to the conclusion. But you don't have to listen to that. Again, this thing has a spirit inside of this molecule. They're used to dealing with dead zombie molecules. Of course, there are no considerations for that aspect of it. Because they're dealing with dead zombie molecules that they're trying to do binary, if I do A, then I get B, therefore it equals C, right? That type of thinking. It's linear. And medicine is not linear. Medicine is spiral. Medicine is cyclical. Medicine is in a hoop or a circle. It's all of those things. And Western scientists, I don't think, they have the ability to really understand the spiritual component of this molecule because there's a sentience there. I once met a scientist that experienced telepathy and it shook them to their core of everything that they understood. They had no idea that telepathy was possible. And then they went to try to explain it to their other scientist friends, and their scientist friends were like, what are you talking about? You're crazy. That's not real. So the moment it's not real because math can't be applied to it to prove it. Sometimes there's a lot of people on this that are walking this planet that has to see something in order to believe it. But there's a lot more power that comes from the ability to believe something before you can see it, because the future hasn't been created yet. So you have to project yourself to an open perception into the possibility of something that something already knows that you don't. And then when you have that possibility, then you can start to see the relationships between seemingly unrelated things. And then it's going to be like there's some sort of transmission that's happening that can't necessarily be observed.
Since it is not easy for you to recognize other varieties of intelligence around you, your most advanced theories of politics and society have advanced only as far as the notion of collectivism. But beyond the cohesion of the members of the species into a single social organism, there lie richer and even more baroque evolutionary possibilities. Symbiosis is one of these. Symbiosis is a relation of mutual dependence and positive benefits for both of the species involved. Symbiotic relationships between myself and civilized forms of higher animals have been established many times and in many places throughout the long ages of my development. These relationships have been mutually useful. Within my memory is the knowledge of hyperlight drive ships and how to build them. I will trade this knowledge for a free ticket to new worlds around suns less forsaken and nearer galaxy center. To secure an eternal existence down the long river of cosmic swarm or heir to.
For Doug Red-Hale, sentience is not simply a biological classification. It changes the relationship. A substance is consumed. A living ally is approached with intention, permission, and respect. Perhaps the relationship itself is part of the experience. Ceremony, expectation, and trust can shape how a person encounters any medicine. That does not make the experience imaginary, but it complicates the question of where the healing begins. If sentient, the mushrooms become healers, and maybe much more than just medicine. Maybe they are not only speaking to us, but perhaps they can heal us as well.
Nature is patient. It's been evolving for billions of years, and human civilization is just a blink of an eye, a tiny moment of that evolution. And there is so much wisdom in the natural world that we are still discovering. And so this question, Rita, you started off this conversation with a really good one, what is the meaning of life? It's such a big one to start. But this question are what's the meaning of life? And as we move along through that and our role of humanity in this timeline of also it's what happens when us as a society, what happens when we become disconnected from itself? We become disconnected from nature. We become disconnected from one another. And we know we're watching the world around us and all the pressures and all the depression and all the violence and all of the conflict and all of that that's happening around us. And Rita, you just said it. What happens when we come back together? When we come back and we close that circle off again and we become a unit again? And how do we become, we're still our individual people, our individual sovereign human beings. We have agency over our lives and our spirituality, etc. But we're also collective in that nature. It is the source that ties us all together. It's where we came from, and it's where we're going to return to. And all of us will go back into that ocean of life again, that ocean of love, that ocean of humanity. Healing isn't about forgetting or erasing the pain. Healing is changing our relationship with it. Our nervous system, our perspective, all of that.
Fungi display remarkable forms of sensing, adaptation, and information processing. Whether that constitutes sentience remains scientifically unresolved. We know fungi exchange information. We do not know whether they consciously experience that exchange. But perhaps the question changes something in us. If we approach mushrooms as relationships rather than commodities, could that transform how we understand psychedelic medicine, nature, and our place within the living world? What if mushrooms are sentient beings, partners in our healing, who help us heal ourselves physically, mentally, and spiritually? If fungi are communicating in ways we are only beginning to understand, are we ready to listen?
Rita, with that, I just want to say, again, thank you, and thank you for your listeners. Appreciate the invitation to come and talk a little bit more about natural psychedelics. They're now back in the hands of society, of humanity to work with as allies, as healers. It's a very powerful time to be a human and have these available to us. Rita, thank you, and I hope to do this again.
Thank you, Doug. I hope to do it again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Much love. Take care.
Thanks for watching. If you liked it, please like and subscribe to Cheshire Corners. Tell me what you think in the comments. And as always, don't get psyched out.